A single horse leaned into its harness while a boat carrying dozens of tons of cargo glided silently through a canal that workers had carved by hand across the countryside. No diesel engines, no excavators, no modern machines. Just thousands of determined laborers, powerful draft horses, and years of relentless effort that transformed entire nations. Yet one question still remains. How did they build waterways stretching for hundreds of miles using nothing more than muscle and simple tools? Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more forgotten engineering stories that history almost left behind. For centuries, moving heavy cargo across land was painfully slow, expensive, and unpredictable. Wagons struggled through deep mud after rain, wooden wheels broke on rough roads, and steep hills exhausted both people and animals long before reaching their destination. A single journey could take weeks, while the cost of transportation often exceeded the value of the goods being delivered. Merchants understood the problem better than anyone else. Coal, timber, grain, iron and stone were becoming essential for growing towns, yet hauling those materials over rough roads consumed enormous amounts of time and money. Rivers helped wherever nature provided them, but many important communities stood far away from reliable waterways. Prosperity depended on finding an entirely new solution. Engineers reached a bold conclusion. Instead of forcing wagons to cross the landscape, they would reshape the landscape itself. Artificial waterways could allow one horse to pull loads that previously demanded dozens of wagons. Water reduced friction so dramatically that cargo weighing many tons suddenly became practical to move over long distances. Planning such a canal required remarkable patience rather than guesswork. Surveyors walked mile after mile carrying measuring chains, compasses, leveling instruments, and notebooks. Every hill, valley, stream and marsh had to be carefully recorded before a single shovel touched the ground. Even a slight mistake in elevation could stop water from flowing correctly or leave an expensive section completely useless. Keeping the water level steady became the greatest challenge. Unlike rivers, canals could not simply rush downhill wherever gravity carried them. Boats needed calm, controlled water from one end to the other. Engineers searched for routes that followed gentle contours across the countryside, avoiding steep climbs whenever possible while still connecting farms, mines, factories, and busy trading ports. Months sometimes passed before construction even began. Landowners negotiated access across private property, supplies arrived from distant quarries and forests, and temporary camps appeared along the planned route. Blacksmiths repaired tools, carpenters prepared equipment, and stable hands cared for hundreds of horses that would soon become the project's greatest source of power. Each decision made during this quiet planning stage determined whether years of labor would succeed or fail. Once thousands of workers entered the landscape, changing direction became painfully difficult. Accuracy at the beginning saved enormous effort later, yet careful drawings and measured lines solved only part of the challenge. Turning open countryside into a navigable canal demanded an astonishing partnership between skilled workers and thousands of powerful horses, each performing a job that no machine had yet been invented to do. That partnership began the moment construction crews arrived on the route. Before sunrise, camps came alive as blacksmiths lit their forges, cooks prepared simple meals, and teamsters harnessed powerful draft horses for another exhausting day. Within hours, thousands of people and animals were moving with surprising coordination across miles of unfinished ground. If you're enjoying this journey into forgotten engineering, subscribe now so you won't miss the next story about the remarkable workers who built the modern world long before heavy machinery existed. Each horse had a specific purpose. Some pulled heavy wagons loaded with freshly excavated soil. Others dragged massive timber beams for bridges, lock gates and temporary roadways. Stronger teams hauled blocks of stone from nearby quarries, while smaller animals delivered food, tools, water barrels and replacement equipment wherever crews needed them. Nothing stood idle because every delay slowed hundreds of other workers. Laborers dug continuously with picks, shovels and wheelbarrows. As fresh earth came loose, waiting horses immediately carried it away before the growing trench became blocked. Drivers understood exactly when to move forward, when to stop, and how to avoid interfering with neighboring crews. Years of experience allowed the entire operation to flow almost like a carefully rehearsed performance instead of chaotic manual labor. Keeping hundreds of horses healthy required constant attention. Large stables stretched alongside the construction camps, storing mountains of hay, oats and fresh water every single day. Veterinarians treated injured animals while farriers replaced worn horseshoes after countless miles across rough ground. Feeding and caring for the horses became a construction project almost as demanding as digging the canal itself. Temporary wooden tracks often crossed muddy sections where ordinary wagons would sink. Rolling carts moved more easily across these simple railways, allowing horses to haul heavier loads with less effort. Whenever conditions changed, carpenters quickly dismantled the tracks and rebuilt them farther along the route so construction never lost momentum. Communication remained surprisingly simple. Foremen relied on shouted instructions, hand signals, whistles, and years of shared experience. Every crew understood its responsibility, allowing hundreds of separate tasks to blend into one enormous operation. Even without engines or radios, remarkable coordination kept the project moving forward day after day. Watching the site from above would have revealed a living machine powered entirely by muscle. Horses pulled, workers dug, wagons rolled. Blacksmiths repaired broken tools. Carpenters built temporary structures. Every movement depended on another, creating a chain of effort stretching across the landscape. Moving millions of tons of earth demanded extraordinary endurance. Surprisingly, digging the canal was not the hardest challenge. Keeping water exactly where engineers wanted it would test every skill those builders possessed. Keeping water under control demanded far more skill than simply digging a long trench. A canal could look complete from the surface yet fail completely if water leaked into the surrounding soil, overflowed its banks or disappeared through hidden cracks. Months of hard labor could be lost because of one overlooked weakness. Engineers approached the problem with remarkable precision. Every section had to remain at the correct depth while maintaining a gentle, predictable level from one end to the other. Whenever the land rose or fell too sharply, workers built locks that lifted boats step by step instead of forcing them to climb impossible slopes. Those locks became the true heart of every successful canal. Building a single lock required thousands of carefully fitted stones. Masons shaped each block by hand until every joint matched perfectly. Carpenters crafted enormous wooden gates from thick oak timbers, while blacksmiths forged heavy iron hinges, bolts, and locking mechanisms strong enough to withstand years of constant use. Nothing could be rushed because the pressure of moving water exposed every mistake. Stopping leaks created another enormous challenge. Workers lined many canals with layers of puddle clay, a dense material mixed, spread, and compacted by hand until it formed a nearly watertight barrier. Horses pulled heavy rollers across the surface to compress the clay even further, creating a solid foundation before water was allowed into the channel. Crossing rivers introduced an entirely different engineering problem. Instead of letting river water mix with canal water, builders often constructed aqueducts that carried the canal high above the natural stream below. Massive stone arches supported these structures, allowing boats to glide peacefully across valleys where many people expected an ordinary bridge instead. Heavy rain threatened freshly completed sections almost overnight. Embankments sometimes collapsed under saturated soil, while rising streams washed away weeks of progress. Repair crews returned immediately, rebuilding damaged banks before the destruction spread farther along the route. Construction rarely moved forward without occasionally stepping backward first. Every completed section faced careful inspection before opening to traffic. Engineers measured water levels repeatedly, checked locked gates for smooth operation, and searched every bank for signs of slow leaks. Small problems corrected early prevented far greater failures after fully loaded boats began passing through the canal. Success depended on countless invisible details working together perfectly. Travelers admired calm water and graceful boats, yet few realized how much planning, craftsmanship, and patience lay beneath that peaceful surface. Even flawless engineering could not protect the people and animals carrying out the work. Behind every finished lock, embankment, and aqueduct stood years of relentless labor, constant danger, and sacrifices that rarely appeared in official records. Behind every completed mile stood thousands of ordinary people whose names rarely appeared in history books. Canal companies recorded budgets, engineering drawings and construction schedules with remarkable detail, yet the workers who spent years digging through rock, lifting stone, and guiding horses across dangerous ground often disappeared into little more than payroll records. Their labour built the canals, but their stories were quietly forgotten. Life on a canal project tested both body and mind. Most labourers worked from sunrise until dusk, 6 days each week, through burning summer heat and freezing winter winds. Rain transformed excavation sites into deep fields of mud. Dry weather filled the air with dust that coated clothes, tools and lungs. Every season introduced a different hardship, but the work never truly stopped. Accidents happened with alarming regularity. Steep trench walls sometimes collapsed without warning, trapping workers beneath tons of soil before nearby crews could reach them. Heavy stone blocks slipped while being lifted into place. Wagons overturned on uneven ground. Horses occasionally lost their footing on muddy slopes, pulling equipment and drivers into dangerous situations within seconds. Even experienced workers understood that each morning carried real risks. The horses faced equally exhausting demands. Powerful draft breeds hauled enormous loads across rough temporary roads from dawn until evening. Their harnesses rubbed against tired muscles, while constant pulling strained joints and hooves over months of continuous labour. Stable hands worked tirelessly to feed them, treat injuries, replace worn horseshoes, and keep valuable animals healthy enough to continue working. Without that daily care, construction would have slowed almost immediately. One documented account from 19th century canal construction describes a team struggling to move an oversized stone through deep mud after days of relentless rain. Additional horses were brought forward one pair at a time until the combined strength finally freed the load. Nobody celebrated. The crews simply continued working because another delivery already waited behind them. That quiet determination appeared again and again throughout canal history. Families also carried hidden burdens. Many labourers lived in temporary camps far from home for months or even years. Wives, children and parents often depended entirely on wages earned under dangerous conditions. Missing a week's work because of injury could leave an entire household struggling to survive. Every completed section represented sacrifice reaching far beyond the construction site itself, yet those hardships produced something extraordinary. Slowly, mile after mile, disconnected trenches became continuous waterways linking farms, mines, factories and growing cities. People who had once needed weeks to move heavy cargo suddenly measured journeys in days instead. The greatest achievement was never simply digging a channel across the countryside. It was creating a transportation network that transformed commerce, expanded opportunity, and changed everyday life long after the workers themselves had disappeared from public memory. Those waterways soon carried far more than boats and cargo. They carried economic growth that reshaped entire regions and influenced generations that never witnessed the remarkable effort required to build them. Those finished canals quickly transformed the way entire nations moved goods, people, and opportunity. Boats carrying coal, timber, grain, iron, and building stone traveled farther with far less effort than wagon traffic ever could. A single horse walking along a towpath pulled loads that previously demanded teams of animals struggling across rough roads. Transportation became cheaper, more reliable, and dramatically more efficient. Factories expanded because raw materials arrived on time and in larger quantities. Farmers reached distant markets before crops spoiled. Mines shipped heavier loads without exhausting endless wagon teams. Merchants lowered prices as transportation costs fell, allowing ordinary families to buy products that had once been difficult or expensive to obtain. Quiet waterways became powerful economic lifelines stretching across the countryside. Entire communities grew beside those canals. Small villages developed into busy trading centres where warehouses, mills, workshops and markets gathered around the water. New jobs appeared for lock keepers, boat builders, blacksmiths, warehouse workers, stable hands, merchants, and captains. Prosperity followed the canals, attracting families searching for better opportunities and helping isolated regions connect with the wider economy. The horses never stopped working after construction ended. Every day they walked the towpaths beside loaded canal boats, pulling enormous cargoes with calm, steady effort. Drivers guided them along familiar routes while boats slipped quietly through the water behind them. The same animals that had helped build the canals now kept them operating year after year, becoming an essential part of everyday commercial life. Success inspired even greater ambition. Engineers planned longer routes linking rivers, ports, manufacturing centers, and growing cities into vast transportation networks. Every completed canal encouraged another project somewhere else, spreading construction techniques, engineering knowledge, and practical experience across countries that had watched earlier successes with admiration. Eventually, however, a new form of transportation began changing everything. Steam locomotives moved faster, climbed steeper ground, and operated throughout the year without depending on frozen waterways or carefully managed water levels. Railroads expanded rapidly, carrying freight over routes that canals could never easily reach. Decades later, diesel-powered excavators, bulldozers, and trucks transformed construction itself, completing in days work that once demanded months of relentless manual labor. Technology advanced exactly as progress always does. Faster machines replaced slower methods. Powerful engines reduced physical strain. Modern equipment accomplished remarkable tasks with astonishing speed. Yet something valuable quietly disappeared during that transition. Generations of practical knowledge slowly faded away. The teamwork required to coordinate hundreds of workers and horses became unnecessary. Skills once passed from experienced teamsters to young apprentices gradually vanished as machines assumed those responsibilities. Many historic towpaths grew silent, while the people who had mastered that demanding craft slipped from public memory. Ironically, the engines that eventually replaced horses owed part of their success to the transportation revolution those canals had already created. Long before modern construction equipment existed, determined workers and patient animals had already proven that impossible landscapes could be reshaped through planning, persistence, and extraordinary cooperation alone. Steam engines eventually dominated transportation, and diesel machinery transformed construction forever. Excavators replaced hundreds of laborers with a single operator. Powerful trucks hauled loads that once required long lines of draft horses. Projects that had demanded years of exhausting effort could now be completed within months. Progress arrived exactly as engineers had hoped, yet it quietly closed one remarkable chapter of human achievement. Many canal routes survived that transition. Some continued carrying commercial traffic while others became peaceful waterways surrounded by walking paths, historic villages, and restored locks. Travelers often admire the calm scenery without realizing that every curve, embankment, bridge, and towpath was shaped by thousands of determined workers using little more than hand tools, careful planning, and animal power. Few visitors stopped to imagine the daily rhythm that once filled those landscapes. Before sunrise, horses waited patiently beside crowded stables. Blacksmiths repaired worn tools beside glowing forges. Lock builders measured heavy timbers with practiced precision. Teamsters guided loaded wagons across muddy ground while surveyors checked elevations that had to remain accurate for miles. Every task depended on another, creating an enormous system that functioned through cooperation rather than machinery. Digging the canals was never the greatest accomplishment. The real achievement was organizing thousands of people, animals, supplies, and construction skills into one coordinated effort that continued season after season. Long before engines solved difficult engineering problems with mechanical power, ordinary workers solved them with patience, discipline, and experience earned through years of demanding labor. Modern equipment deserves admiration because it saves time, reduces danger, and allows projects once considered impossible. Even so, today's machines perform work that earlier generations completed through determination alone. Understanding those older methods makes modern engineering even more impressive because it reveals just how far construction has evolved without diminishing the achievements that came before. Most of the workers who built these canals left almost nothing behind except the waterways themselves. Their names disappeared from newspapers, payroll books gathered dust inside forgotten archives, and the practical knowledge they carried slowly vanished as experienced builders retired. Unlike famous engineers or wealthy investors, the people swinging the shovels rarely received monuments or lasting recognition. Their legacy, however, remains impossible to ignore. Hundreds of historic canals still shape landscapes across Europe and North America. Stone locks continue raising boats exactly as their builders intended. Aqueducts still carry water across valleys. Towpaths remain visible beside quiet channels where horses once walked every single day. Careful craftsmanship has outlived the generations that created it. Next time you stand beside an old canal, look beyond the peaceful water. Picture thousands of workers digging through stubborn ground, teams of horses pulling impossible loads, blacksmiths striking glowing iron, and surveyors measuring every inch with extraordinary care. Those waterways were never simply trenches filled with water. They were living proof that patience, teamwork, and determination could reshape entire nations, long before diesel engines changed the world forever. The next time you pass an old canal, remember the thousands of workers and horses who built it with nothing but determination, skill, and simple tools. If you enjoyed this forgotten engineering story, subscribe for more historical construction documentaries, then watch the next video to uncover another hidden achievement.